Pokemon fans have come to expect, in addition to a new generation every few years, a new remake every few years. That all started with Pokemon FireRed and Pokemon LeafGreen on the Game Boy Advance, the first remakes and what I consider to be Kanto perfected. The Kanto games have since been remade again in a much more casual and Pokemon Go compatible form with Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee on Switch, and while I love those games, FireRed and LeafGreen are definitely the definitive Kanto experience for serious Pokemon enthusiasts. FireRed and LeafGreen follow the same storyline and game beats as Red and Blue, or Green if you're in Japan, up through beating the Elite Four, with the exception of moving Moltres to a different location and adding an additional requirement before you're allowed to access Cerulean Cave and catch Mewtwo. That alone justifies playing it in my opinion. I adore the original Red and Blue, but they're definitely janky. No running shoes, no held items, lots of bugs and glitches, and special attack and special defense are combined into one incomprehensible special stat by modern standards. FireRed and LeafGreen fix almost all of that. The special physical split for moves happened after this game's release, so what's a physical attack and what's a special attack is based on the type. For example, all electric moves are special, but all ghost moves are physical. And that's definitely weird for modern players to get used to, but that's really the only complaint I have, and that's not a flaw so much as just being released before that mechanic change was made. What takes the game from being the perfect remake to being what I consider to be the second best game in the series, after Heart Gold and Soul Silver of course, is the post-game. After you beat the Elite Four, your journey is not finished. You may have rolled the credits, but there's still more to do. Mewtwo has always been restricted to post-game, even in Red and Blue, where you couldn't access Cerulean Cave until you beat the Elite Four. FireRed and LeafGreen doesn't just have that bit of post-game, though. It adds entire new areas of 7 islands to explore, the Sevi Islands. There's a quest you have to complete here before you're allowed to explore the Cerulean Cave and catch Mewtwo. That's not too bad, though, because the other thing the Sevi Island post-game does is let you catch most of the Johto Pokemon and the ability to breed a couple of the Hoenn Pokemon, as well as letting you trade with Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. This was a big deal at the time, as it made getting certain Pokemon a lot easier, and for some, like the Kanto starters, it made it attainable in Ruby and Sapphire for the first time ever via trades. It also unlocks post-Gen 1 evolutions. For example, before you beat the Elite Four, breeding isn't possible, and Porygon and Scyther are incapable of evolving into Porygon 2 and Scizor. Once you're in the post-game, though, the items that allow them to evolve become available to you, and you can obtain the baby Pokemon by unlocking breeding. Visually, this is my favorite Pokemon game. I personally think sprite graphics hit their apex with the 32-bit Game Boy Advance, and while the sprites in the Gen 4 and Gen 5 Pokemon games may have been more detailed, I'll always have a soft spot for the art style of the Pokemon sprites in Gen 3 and in these Gen 1 remakes. Move effects look awesome while still retaining a classic feel, and some of the ripple effects of traversal over water look great. The music is also peak Pokemon chiptune OST. The soundtracks of modern games with modern music may be better in a technical sense, but nothing will top the nostalgia of Pokemon chiptune music in my heart. The same is true of the Pokemon's cries. The nostalgia makes me temporarily forget that I'm staring middle age in the face. My one sole complaint about the audio design is the danger sound when your Pokemon's health is in the red. Future games had the alarm sound for a couple of seconds, and then it stopped. FireRed and LeafGreen released in the era where that sound was constant and unceasing as long as your active Pokemon's health was in the red, never stopping until your Pokemon heals or dies. It is honestly super annoying. It was always super annoying, but it's especially annoying now, going back after getting used to years and years of Pokemon games that don't eternally berate you with a screaming warning siren. With their re-release on Nintendo Switch, FireRed and LeafGreen are now easily accessible for old folks like me to relive our nostalgic childhood games, and for young players to experience these adventures for the first time. It needs to be noted, though, that these aren't cheap for what they are, and there are no modern quality of life improvements. They are completely faithful ports through and through, and there's no online battling or trading. Online play didn't exist for the Game Boy Advance, so it's not an option here. They do add in, by default, the event items that let you catch Ho-Oh, Lugia, and Deoxys, though, so that is pretty cool. As for the price, a lot of folks were upset they weren't just added to the Nintendo Switch Online GBA library. I didn't expect that. That would have been leaving tons of money on the table for an IP like Pokemon. But I didn't expect the separate e-price shop to be $20 each. So if, like me, you want both versions so you can get all of the version exclusives, you'll need to fork out $40 plus tax. That's excessive. $10 would have been reasonable, I think, and while $20 is obviously not a deal breaker for most, they've sold extremely well on the eShop, I do think it's the upper limit of what one could justifiably argue is reasonable. On the bright side, not being wrapped into the NSO launcher means that, at some point down the line, we will get Pokemon Home compatibility for FireRed and LeafGreen. On the not-so-bright side, it's been confirmed that those will be one-way transfers. You can move Pokemon from FireRed and LeafGreen into Home, but you can't move Pokemon from Home into FireRed and LeafGreen. While this isn't entirely unexpected, it definitely sucks, as Home was the way one would fill in version exclusives in games like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, Sword and Shield, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, and Scarlet and Violet. Still though, it will make adding Deoxys to their home collections a lot easier for players who haven't been playing for decades. Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen are honestly probably, while I think the second best games in the series, my third favorite set of games in the entire series, and they're my second favorite remakes of the series. As I've said, Heart Gold and Soul Silver top it, and I personally would put Legends Arceus above it, but only barely. Their age means that they do retain some of the archaic mechanics and design elements that most Pokemon players are glad got left in the past, but in no way does that make them less worth playing. They are still the definitive way to experience Kanto, and they're still absolute masterpieces in their own right. Just remember that you're playing games made for a 2D handheld device over 2 decades ago. A lot of us, myself included, think Pokemon was best when it was 2D, and I'd argue that this is one of the best 2D Pokemon games. My rating for Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen on the Game Boy Advance and Switch is an S.